In chapter 13 of his masterwork, Leviathan, Thomas Hobbes is laying out for us what he calls the natural condition of mankind. And it's pretty grim, pretty stark. He is sketching out something that is going to run throughout the history of ideas as the kind of place that we don't want to be. And many people are going to criticize him for his assumptions about the state of nature and about human conflict. But many people are also going to point out that this is an ever-present possibility for human beings. And so we want to look very carefully at what Hobbes is depicting the normal, natural state of human beings outside of society to be, so that we can follow out his master argument and see why we would actually want to go along with the rest of the remedies that he's suggesting. In part, things have to be pretty bad for us to say, yes, Hobbes, you're right, we need an absolute authority, a government that we can't question to be in place. And the state of nature is going to provide some of the backing for that. So when Hobbes is talking about the state of nature, first of all, he's going to call it a state of war of all against all. And the way that he depicts human beings is that we're naturally prone to conflict with each other on a number of different accounts that actually intensify when we put them together. And we're going to look at those in just a minute. But why else is it a state of war of all against all? There's a couple different reasons for that. One is, in the state of nature, we're all more or less on the same level. And although human beings do differ quite a bit in our physical characteristics, in some of our mental characteristics, we are pretty much on a level playing field. I mean, I might be stronger than some people and weaker than other people. I'm in a lot worse shape now than I was when I was young and exercising all the time. So, in a pure state of nature, I might not, in a survival situation, I might not fare so well. But when it comes to our physical capacities, one human being is generally not radically different from another, and it's pretty easy to come up with simple technology that evens things out. So if I see some guy who's coming at me and he's got his bare hands and he's a big burly guy, well, I get a stone and I crack his head open. Or I devise a sling, or I make a spear. It doesn't take too much to do that. And I can always team up with a couple other guys who aren't quite as strong and take the big guy down. There's a lot of other possibilities of doing the same sort of thing, and it's really the same when it comes to mental faculties, Hobbes thinks, as well. Some people are smarter, some people are not as smart, but for the most part it's a level playing field, and we can count on other people being more or less like us. So why does that lead us to war? Well, in a state of nature, Hobbes says, there are no moral norms. Or rather, the only moral norm there is you can do whatever you like. And so when we've looked at the Hobbesian treatment of the passions and desire and action, we see that we're often driven to do things that we would like, or we're driven away from things that we would not like, that we fear, and there tend to be rather unsavory aspects to that. There's a lot of desires that we have that were we to indulge, we probably would have a harder time looking at ourselves in the mirror in the morning and saying, you're a decent person. But that's because decency is not something that is there or a concern in the state of nature. That's something that happens in civil society, within civilization, within some sort of functioning, interpersonal, societal, political, including economic, set of order and arrangement. That's not something that's available on the desert island when we've crashed the plane, or if we're on Gilligan's Island, we've crashed the boat. So Hobbes is going to say it's a war of all against all. And what this means is that the life of people in that sort of condition is not going to be an enviable one. It sounds great, people saying, do what you like, you're on a desert island, You're strong, take from the weak. But that means that anybody else can take from you. And whatever you take from them, they can get from you just as easily. The weak can band together and poison you in the middle of the night. They can build a pit, you fall in it, nobody's going to save you. So what we're looking at there is a life that has these terrible characteristics. And he's got this famous line where he says that the life of a person in the state of nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And it's actually worth dwelling on each of these. Solitary. Why is it solitary? Because you can't actually count on anybody else to cooperate with you or to be loyal to you, including family members. You can have families in the state of nature. Of course, there's a natural cycle of reproduction, and families even can exist on their own as sort of like little mini communities, but they're always liable to break up. Poor. Why is it poor? Because you can't develop anything in a state of nature. You can do simple technology, but why would you invest the time, the labor, the thought, the activity in developing anything that somebody might take away from you easily? Why make your house nice? Why develop, arts and crafts to make, wonderful weavings, so you can have clothes that fit? Or, metallurgy, or why even bother doing agriculture if some guy can just come by, kill you, take your field, take all your stuff? So it's going to be poor. Nasty. He doesn't mean nasty in the way that a lot of people do these days, where they mean dirty necessarily, or, nasty in some sort of sexual way. He just means that, it's not going to be a very nice life. You're probably going to be rather grubby a lot of the time. You're not going to have a lot of creature comforts. Brutish. What does brutish mean? Brutish means like an animal. In a certain way, human nature outside of society is not really human nature for Thomas Hobbes. It's just animal nature, and we're the most dangerous animal of all. That's something worth thinking about, worth dwelling on. Human beings, for Thomas Hobbes, can only realize human nature within what he's calling civil society. Take them away from that, or take civil society away from them, and they descend to the level of the brutes, but they're worse than all the other animals for the reasons we're going to see down here. Short. Why is life in the state of nature short? Because, think about it. There's no medicine. You get sick, you get an infection, you're going to die. Or, maybe you get over it, and then the next one will get you. There's no common cooperation. It's hard to get places because nobody's going to bother building roads. There's enemies and potential enemies everywhere. You can never count on anybody to help you out. That doesn't sound very good, does it? Well, how do we end up there? Why should it be a war of all against all? Why can't human beings just get along with each other? Here Hobbes is going to discuss some features of human nature that I think a lot of us would like to, try to put under the rug and try to ignore. We like to think that we're not these kind of people. And Hobbes says, well, if you're not that kind of person, it's because something has happened that's made you very, very different from most other people, or you've developed certain habits, and you probably developed those within a civil society. He talks about three main reasons why we get into conflict with each other. He calls these competition, diffidence or anticipation, and vanity or glory. And I've put these little diagrams here to try to convey how these work. But I do want to read some of the passages. He says, from equality of ability arises the equality of hope in the attaining of our ends, getting what we want. And therefore, if two people desire the same thing, which they both can't enjoy, they become enemies. And in the way to their end, which is primarily self-preservation or doing what they want, they endeavor to destroy or to subdue one another. So what we have going on with competition is two people desire the same thing and they both can't have the same thing. This could be sexual in terms of mates. This could be about land. This could be about, goods like chalk. I want the chalk so I can write on the chalkboard. Get out of here, Dr. Sadler. It's my turn. So long as it's a good that can't be shared in common, it's something that we can enter into competition about. And when we enter into competition, because of the kind of animals that we are, and many other animals do this as well, not even just predators, many prey creatures, many herbivores get into competition with each other over feeding grounds, over mates, over things like that. But we human beings have a much wider range of desires, so we can get into competition, and in that, I want what you have or want, and I'm willing to kill you, or wound you, or subdue, that is, make you a subject, a slave for my own desires, in order to get what it is that I want. And you're willing to do the same thing to me, so that means that we're going to have to come into conflict. And actually, anybody else who's over there watching us at the same time, we'd better make sure that when we fight, we keep it away from other people's prying eyes, because if they want what we've got while we're fighting, they might come along and steal it, or they might kill both of us. So that's one main reason for human conflict. And some theories of human conflict want to reduce human conflict solely to competition, to say, well, if we got rid of competition, if we got rid of scarcity, if we had enough goods for everybody, then there'd be no problem, and we'd never get into any sort of conflict with each other. If we can find ways to, maybe diminish our desires or share our goods more equally, we can deal with that. Hobbes doesn't think that's the case, though. Why not? Because we have two other reasons for fighting with each other. He says, from this diffidence of one another, what does diffidence mean? Well, if we go back a little bit, he says, it comes to pass that where an invader has no more to fear than another man's single power, if a person plants or sows or builds, others can be expected to come prepared with forces united to dispossess and deprive him not only of the fruit of his labor, but also of his life and liberty. And the invader is, again, in like danger of another. Diffidence means that we can anticipate that other people are going to try the same thing to us. So, as I put it here, you're like me, so since I know that I'd attack you, you're going to attack me. I better get you first. And so that's why, another word for this is anticipation. I've got this word preemptive strike there. When you preemptively strike somebody, they haven't actually attacked you yet. But you think that they're going to attack you, you're planning or you're anticipating that they're going to do something to you, so you strike first before they can do it. This can become a real problem, because if this person over here is thinking that, this person over here could have the same ideas and say, man, that guy over there is going to be afraid of me, so he's going to preemptively strike, so I had better do a preemptive strike before his preemptive strike. And what can happen is two people actually just, wind up looking at each other and they're like, oh, we got to fight. We got to, come to blows. Why? Because you're going to come to blows with me. How do you know that? Because you're the same kind of bad guy as I am. So he says, there's no way for any man to secure himself so reasonable as anticipation, that is, by force or by wiles, to master all the persons of all men that he can, so long till he see no other power great enough to endanger him. And what does this mean? Well, not just, running into people and saying, oh, you're like me, bam, I'm going to pop you in the face. Instead, it's more like, how can I conquer everybody? How can I make sure that nobody can possibly ever oppose me, so that I can be totally sure that nobody is ever going to present a threat? At the same time, everybody else is doing the same thing. Everybody else is thinking, how can I protect myself against all these other people who are likewise going to be trying to get my stuff, who are likewise going to be laying traps for me? So you can see that this makes it very dangerous. Add these two together, you realize that other people are going to come into competition with you. So, for example, if you're two guys and you're both attracted to, the same person, if you know that somebody is going to be your rival, do something to them before they do something to you, because you know that they're going to do something to you because of the competition. Now, that's pretty bad, isn't it? You can see there's a lot of room for conflict not only happening, but spilling over and escalating and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It gets even worse. There's this other motive that Hobbes calls vanity or glory. He says, Human beings have no pleasure in keeping company where there's no power able to overawe them all, that is, somebody to keep order. For every man looks that his companion should value him at the same rate that he sets upon himself, and upon any sign of contempt or undervaluing, naturally endeavors, as far as he dares, to extort a greater value from his contemners by domage, and from others by the examples. What does all this mean? There's a little fancy language there because we're reading something from the 17th century. It means that I want you to value me at the same rate that I value me, even if I have a totally inflated, narcissistic sense of self-esteem. I want you to think that I'm the swell guy that I am, and the way that you're going to do that is by showing me things. You're going to treat me with respect. You're going to maybe you're going to give way to me. You're going to allow me to have the first word on things and the last word. Now, that can lead to a kind of competition, right? Because not all of us can have the first word or the last word or even the ones in the middle. But notice what's going on here. Instead of us desiring something else, what we really desire is in the other person and that other person's relationship to us. We want the other person to value us the way that we want to be valued. And at the same time, they want us to value them the same way that they want to be valued. This is like setting up a powder keg. Because not only do we have a bunch of, people who have no real realistic sense of their own self-worth, and it's, very inflated, and so they're ready to take offense. Even if we have realistic conceptions of self-worth, it may not be possible to get the other person to acknowledge that. Because they could be a jerk, right? They could be captivated by their own desires. They might not want to give it to us because they're in competition with us, or they're thinking we might try to kill them. And then there's the random stuff that happens. Hobbes has, some great examples here. He says, in the nature of man we find three causes of quarrel: competition, diffidence, and glory. The first makes people invade for gain. Okay, makes sense, right? We're greedy. We want what the other person has, so we invade them to get their stuff. The second for safety. The third for reputation. The first use violence to make themselves masters of other people's persons, wives, children, and cattle. The second to defend them. Again, fairly rational there. But the third, he says, for trifles, as a word, a smile, a different opinion, any other sign of undervalue, either direct in their persons, but it doesn't have to be in that person. It can be in their kindred, their friends, their nation, their profession, or their name. People can take offense and feel that they have been slighted, that they've been in some way violated for just about any reason whatsoever. Even good people can do that, and when we get to bad people, they're even more liable to that. So, again, if we think about how these fit in together, if I know that you, I'm looking ahead with anticipation, if I know that you are a vain person, that you have an inflated sense of self-esteem, that you're going to want me to listen to your nonsense and laugh at your jokes, and if I don't, you're going to get angry at me, I'd better do something to you so that you don't harm me, because I'm not going to put up with your nonsense. We're in the state of nature. I don't have to put up with your silliness. So all three of these can intersect with each other. And now you see that in the state of nature, we have a lot of situations where people are really primed to be brought into conflict with each other. Once the conflict begins, there's really no way to bring it to an end other than one party giving in, or one party dying, or one party leaving the area, because there's no common power and no norms to settle the account. And while these drives, these basic human impulses are in place, the conflict is going to continue. Once you start a conflict, you also have the fact that people start telling different stories about who started the conflict and why the conflict is occurring. that makes it even more intractable. So the state of nature is a real live possibility for us when things break down. One thing I do have to say is Hobbes says that it's not necessarily a war at every moment, like, fighting at every single moment, so long as these are, liable to break out into conflict. We're in the state of war. He likens it to weather. When we say it's bad weather, it doesn't mean that it's snowing or raining all the time, but it means that it has a propensity to do so. There's clouds in the sky. When the clouds are gone, then we can say now we've got good weather. And, so long as the clouds are there, it could be raining on us. So long as there's no common power and no norms to govern us, we are in a state where we're armed and ready to fight with each other.